In July 2023, Carl Hodges, a 45-year-old outdoor enthusiast, set up camp deep in Montana's backcountry. He had always been fascinated by wildlife and spent much of his time exploring nature, documenting his experiences on social media. Originally from Colorado, he had traveled across many parks, believing that humans and wild animals could live together peacefully. His latest adventure was meant to prove this theory. Carl chose a remote clearing near a dense forest, surrounded by towering pines and a small creek running nearby. The spot was peaceful, with birds chirping and the sound of water flowing over smooth rocks. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, he carefully prepared his campsite. He had packed a variety of food, including hamburgers, marshmallows, and other treats, knowing they would attract animals. His plan was simple: leave food out and record what happened. He positioned his camera on a tripod, making sure the view was perfect. He sat near the fire, eating his meal and speaking to the camera about how bears were misunderstood creatures. The air was filled with the scent of grilled meat and melted sugar. As darkness settled over the forest, he felt confident that his plan would work. He had read stories about people encountering bears, and he believed that staying calm was the key to avoiding danger. Hours passed, and Carl waited patiently. Then, just as he was about to give up, a shadow moved at the edge of the trees. A large grizzly bear had caught the scent of the food and was making its way toward the campsite. Its powerful body moved silently through the undergrowth, its nose twitching as it picked up the strongest scents. Carl's heart raced, but he remained seated, trying to appear relaxed. The bear stopped a few feet away, studying the scene before stepping closer. Its dark eyes locked onto the food, and Carl whispered to his camera about the amazing moment unfolding. The grizzly sniffed the air and moved toward the scattered food, pausing only briefly before lowering its massive head to eat. Carl, convinced that the bear posed no threat, slowly raised his hand as if greeting the animal. Without warning, the bear lunged forward, swinging its powerful paw. Its sharp claws struck Carl's face, sending him tumbling backward. Blood splattered across the ground as he collapsed unconscious. The sudden movement startled the bear for a moment, but then it turned its attention back to the food. The fire flickered, casting shadows across the scene. The bear chewed noisily, tearing into the meal that had lured it to the campsite. The camera continued recording as the minutes passed. Carl lay motionless, his injuries severe. The grizzly, now comfortable in its surroundings, moved closer to him, sniffing his body. What happened next would remain unseen until the footage was later recovered. The wilderness was silent except for the sound of the bear feeding. The fire crackled softly, and the camera's red light continued blinking in the darkness. The bear remained near the campsite, chewing through the leftover food. The smell of cooked meat still lingered in the air, keeping the animal interested. The flames from the fire had started to die down, casting flickering shadows around the area. The camera, still positioned on the tripod, continued recording everything. The wilderness remained quiet except for the occasional rustling of leaves and the soft crackling of embers. The grizzly turned its attention back to Carl. He was still lying motionless on the ground, his face covered in blood from the deep wound on his head. The bear sniffed his body before nudging him with its powerful snout. There was no reaction. Satisfied that there was no threat, the animal moved closer. Its sharp teeth sank into his flesh, tearing away pieces as it fed. The sound of ripping echoed through the empty campsite. The bear continued, undisturbed by the surrounding darkness. Time passed, and the night grew colder. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the branches above. The forest remained still, as if watching the scene unfold. Hours later, as the first light of morning stretched across the sky, the bear finally wandered away, disappearing into the trees. The campsite was now in ruins, with scattered belongings and torn fabric from the tent spread across the ground. The only movement came from the flickering red light on the camera. Days later, a search team arrived after Carl had failed to respond to messages from friends. His absence had raised concern, and park authorities were contacted. The team moved carefully through the forest, following a faint trail that led them to the clearing. As they approached the site, the strong smell of decay filled the air. They stepped cautiously over broken branches and scattered supplies before stopping near the remains. Carl's body was partially eaten, his injuries severe and beyond recognition. His belongings were scattered around him, and the camera still stood on its tripod. One of the search team members noticed the blinking light and carefully retrieved the device. The scene was grim, and the team knew there was nothing more they could do. The authorities were informed, and arrangements were made to remove what remained of Carl. Back in town, investigators reviewed the footage from the camera. The last recorded moment showed Carl seated near the fire, his voice calm as the bear approached. The team watched as he raised his hand slightly before the sudden attack. The final moments captured the grizzly sniffing the lens before dragging Carl out of frame. The screen then turned black. News of the attack spread quickly, serving as a warning to those who underestimated the dangers of the wild. Experts reminded visitors of the risks of interacting with large predators. Park rangers placed new warnings around the area, urging people to store food properly and avoid direct encounters with bears. Carl's story became a tragic reminder of how unpredictable nature could be. His final footage remained as proof of the consequences of ignoring safety in the wilderness. In June 2023, the Carter family lived in a quiet rural town in Alaska, surrounded by dense forests and towering mountains. Their home was far from the city, offering a peaceful life in the wilderness. John and Sarah Carter had chosen this place to raise their children, wanting them to grow up close to nature. Their 9-year-old daughter, Lily, loved the outdoors. She spent her days exploring the woods, playing near the house, and watching the animals that often wandered close to their yard. Lily was an adventurous and curious child. She enjoyed collecting wildflowers, skipping stones in the nearby creek, and climbing trees with her older brother. The family knew that living in such a remote area came with risks, so they always reminded their children to be careful. They warned them about wild animals, especially bears, which were often seen nearby. That evening, as the sun slowly set behind the hills, Lily played outside. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and purple. She laughed as she ran across the yard chasing fireflies. Her parents were inside finishing up dinner. They occasionally glanced out the window to check on her. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Without warning, the peaceful moment turned into a nightmare. A grizzly bear, large and powerful, had been lurking in the shadows of the forest. Drawn by the scent of food or simply wandering in search of prey, it had come too close. The bear moved silently, its massive paws making no sound on the grass. Lily, unaware of the danger, continued playing near the edge of the yard. Then, in an instant, the bear lunged. It grabbed her with its powerful jaws and dragged her toward the woods. The attack was swift, leaving no time for her to scream. A few moments later, her parents noticed that the yard was too quiet. They looked outside and saw nothing but an abandoned toy lying on the ground. Panic set in. Sarah ran out first, calling Lily's name. John followed, his heart pounding. As they searched, their worst fear became real. Bloodstains and torn pieces of fabric were found near the trees, along with signs of a struggle. The ground was disturbed, as if something heavy had been pulled through the dirt. John shouted for help, and neighbors soon arrived with flashlights and hunting rifles. Everyone knew that in the wild, time was critical. If a bear had taken Lily, she was in grave danger. The group quickly gathered and followed the tracks leading into the deep forest. Nightfall made the search difficult, but they refused to stop. The community worked together, hoping to find Lily before it was too late. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. The once quiet town was now filled with fear, as the people who knew and loved Lily desperately searched for any sign of her. The search party moved deeper into the forest, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The thick trees and uneven ground made it difficult to move quickly, but no one wanted to give up. The footprints of the bear and drag marks on the dirt gave them a path to follow. Every step forward brought a new wave of fear. The sounds of the night, once familiar and peaceful, now felt haunting. As they walked, the group split into smaller teams, covering different directions. Some carried hunting rifles, knowing that the bear was still out there. Others called out Lily's name, hoping for a response. Hours passed with no sign of her. The deeper they went, the stronger the scent of the forest became. The wind rustled the trees and the distant sounds of wildlife filled the air. Then, one of the searchers raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. A few feet ahead, they found more evidence. Shreds of clothing were caught on low-hanging branches, and the ground was covered in disturbed leaves and broken twigs. Their worst fears seemed to be coming true. They pressed on, their determination growing stronger despite the exhaustion. Not long after, they found a clearing where the tracks ended. Scattered remains confirmed what they had dreaded all along. Hunters found parts of Lily's body near a fallen tree, the ground around it stained with blood. The bear was no longer there, having likely retreated after finishing its meal. The sight sent waves of sorrow through the group. Some turned away, unable to look. Others stood frozen, struggling to accept the harsh truth. The news reached the town quickly. The once quiet community was now filled with grief. The Carter family, devastated and heartbroken, held on to each other for strength. The loss of a child was something no parent should ever have to face. Friends and neighbors gathered at their home, offering support in any way they could. Authorities acted swiftly. Experienced hunters and wildlife officials were called to track down the bear responsible. Days later, they spotted it near another part of the forest. The bear showed no fear of humans, which made it even more dangerous. The hunters took action and euthanized the bear, ensuring that it could not harm anyone else. The tragedy left a lasting impact on the town. People became more cautious, keeping their children closer and reinforcing their homes against wildlife. Experts visited the area to educate residents about bear safety, hoping to prevent another incident. The community placed warning signs in the forests, reminding visitors of the dangers of living near wild animals. A memorial was held for Lily, where friends and family gathered to remember her. They shared stories of her laughter, her love for nature, and the joy she brought to their lives. Though she was gone, her memory remained in the hearts of those who knew her. The small town in Alaska would never forget the day they lost one of their own. In February 2025, the Montana wilderness was covered in thick snow, making travel dangerous. Officers Adam Reynolds and Chris Walker of the Montana Highway Patrol had years of experience dealing with emergencies in harsh conditions. They had seen many accidents caused by icy roads, but neither expected the threat they would face that day. Adam Reynolds, 38 years old, had served in law enforcement for over a decade. He was known for his calm nature and quick thinking. Having grown up in Montana, he understood the dangers of wild animals. Chris Walker, 35, had joined the force 5 years earlier. He was strong, dedicated, and determined to protect the people of his state. The two officers had worked together for years, forming a strong bond. That afternoon, a truck driver reported a large grizzly bear near a snow-covered highway just outside the wilderness in the Rocky Mountains. The driver had nearly hit the animal and said it looked aggressive and confused. Wildlife sightings were common in this area, but a bear so close to the road was dangerous. The officers were sent to check the situation. As they drove along the deserted highway, the air was freezing and visibility was low due to snowfall. They spotted large paw prints in the snow leading toward a roadside ditch. Stopping the patrol car, they stepped out cautiously, scanning the area. The deep snow made it difficult to move quickly. The officers expected to find the bear in the distance, but everything was silent. Without warning, the bear exploded from the ditch. It had been lying low, hidden by the snow. Its massive body surged forward with terrifying speed. Before Reynolds could react, the grizzly knocked him to the ground. The bear mauled him viciously, his screams cut short. Blood stained the snow as the attack continued. Walker reached for his weapon, pulling it from his holster. His hands shook as he fired. The gunshots echoed through the cold air, but the bullets did little to stop the charging bear. It turned its attention to Walker, who tried to retreat. The thick snow slowed him down, and he lost his footing. The grizzly reached him before he could escape, dragging him into the trees and disappearing into the dark wilderness. Silence fell over the highway once more. The snowfall quickly began to cover the bloodstains on the ground. The officer's patrol car sat with its lights flashing, the radio crackling with unanswered calls. Backup arrived soon after, but it was too late. The only signs of the officers were torn uniforms and blood trails leading into the trees. Wildlife authorities were called in to track the bear. It had proven to be a serious threat and had to be dealt with immediately. As night fell over the Montana wilderness, the search for the grizzly began. The officers had responded to a routine call, unaware that it would become one of the deadliest bear attacks in the region. The cold night settled over the Montana wilderness as search teams prepared for the difficult task ahead. The officers had vanished into the dense forest, and the only clues left behind were scattered patches of blood and torn clothing. Wildlife experts and law enforcement worked together, determined to find the grizzly before it could harm anyone else. Tracking the bear in deep snow was challenging. The animal had left a trail leading deeper into the trees, its powerful body moving effortlessly through the frozen landscape. The team followed carefully, their weapons ready. Hours passed before they spotted the bear resting near a rocky outcrop. The moment it sensed movement, it rose to its full height, letting out a deep growl. The men knew they had no choice but to act quickly. The first shot rang out, hitting the bear in the shoulder. It roared in pain but did not retreat. The second shot struck its chest, and the massive creature staggered before collapsing onto the snow. The grizzly that had claimed 2 lives had been stopped. When the search team examined the remains, they found evidence confirming that the bear had consumed parts of the officers. Back at the highway, news of the attack spread quickly. Fellow officers arrived at the scene, their faces filled with grief. Losing 2 of their own in such a violent way was devastating. Adam Reynolds and Chris Walker had been more than just colleagues. They had been friends, fathers, and sons. Their empty patrol car stood as a reminder of the tragedy. The community mourned the loss. Candlelight vigils were held in their honor, and people gathered to support their families. The pain of their absence was deep, especially for those who had worked alongside them for years. Schools, businesses, and government offices lowered flags in their memory. The sacrifice they had made would not be forgotten. Wildlife experts used the incident to raise awareness about the dangers of bear encounters. They explained that grizzlies often became aggressive when disoriented, especially in harsh winter conditions. People were urged to report sightings immediately and avoid areas where bears had been spotted. Officials increased patrols along remote highways, hoping to prevent another tragedy. Months later, a memorial was placed near the site of the attack. A plaque with their names reminded travelers of their bravery. Visitors often stopped to pay their respects, leaving flowers and notes. The highway, once just a road through the wilderness, had become a place of remembrance. The loss of the officers left a lasting impact on Montana. Their dedication to protecting others had cost them their lives, but their memory lived on. Their families, friends, and fellow officers carried their legacy forward, ensuring they would always be remembered. The early summer morning of June 18, 2015, dawned clear and cool in the rugged wilderness of Wyoming. Kevin Harris, a 32-year-old outdoor enthusiast, had set out for a solo ride on one of the state's most popular off-road trails. Known as Teton's Crest, the trail snaked through dense forests, rocky outcrops, and steep descents, offering challenge and exhilaration to mountain bikers. Kevin was no stranger to the wild. He had ridden these trails many times before, confident in his skills and familiarity with the terrain. But the wilderness, unpredictable and indifferent, had its plans that day. Kevin pedaled hard as the trail wound through groves of pine and aspen trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, birds chirping, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. He relished the solitude, the rhythmic hum of his tires on the dirt path, and the adrenaline from navigating sharp turns and steep drops. Teton's Crest was notorious for its technical sections, but it was also beloved for its isolation, cutting deep through bear country. Riders were warned to carry bear spray and make noise on the trails, but Kevin had opted to travel light, eager for speed. As he rounded a bend, the trail began a sharp descent, narrow and hemmed in by thick underbrush. Kevin leaned forward, his tires kicking up dirt and small stones, the wind rushing past his face. He felt the familiar thrill of control balanced on the edge of chaos. But as he hurtled downhill, the dense forest ahead seemed to shift unnaturally, and he saw a massive figure moving through the undergrowth. Before he could react, a grizzly bear emerged onto the trail, no more than 20 feet ahead. It was enormous, its shaggy brown fur bristling as it turned to face him. The bear's dark eyes locked onto Kevin, and it rose slightly on its hind legs. Its presence was unmistakably dominant and territorial. Time seemed to slow as Kevin registered the situation. He had accidentally crossed paths with one of nature's most formidable predators, and there was no time to stop. The bear dropped to all fours and charged. Kevin's instincts took over. He leaned into his handlebars and pedaled furiously, pushing his bike to its limits as he tried to outpace the bear. The grizzly, however, was faster than he had imagined. Its powerful strides sent dirt and debris flying as it closed the distance. The ground trembled under the weight of the animal's pursuit, and Kevin could hear its labored breaths and guttural growls growing louder behind him. The narrow path, littered with roots and loose rocks, left little room for error. Kevin swerved around a jagged boulder, his heart pounding as the bear's shadow loomed behind him. Desperation fueled his speed, but the uneven terrain conspired against him. His front tire struck a hidden root as he rounded another sharp turn, sending him careening off balance. Instantly, Kevin collided with a tree, the impact of which was throwing him off his bike and onto the forest floor. Dazed and disoriented, Kevin barely had time to register the pain in his shoulder and side before the bear was upon him. It roared, swiping at him with claws like hooked knives, tearing through the sleeve of his jersey and raking deep gashes into his arm. Kevin scrambled backward, his hands searching for anything to defend himself. His fingers found the frame of his bike, and he seized it, using it as a makeshift shield. The bear lunged again, claws clanging against the metal frame as Kevin pressed it between them. Frustrated by the obstruction, the grizzly swiped at the bike with enough force to bend the front wheel. Kevin used the momentary distraction to crawl backward, his injured arm throbbing as he struggled to put distance between himself and the animal. The bear charged again, its jaws snapping shut just inches from his leg. With adrenaline, Kevin swung the bike frame at the bear, the movement awkward but desperate. The impact startled the bear, and it hesitated, growling low as it eyed him. Seizing the opportunity, Kevin dragged himself to his feet, clutching the bike frame like a lifeline. His injured arm hung uselessly at his side, blood dripping onto the forest floor. The bear huffed, its ears twitching as it seemed to weigh the effort of continuing the attack. Finally, with a final growl, the animal turned and retreated into the underbrush, leaving Kevin alone in the aftermath. Kevin stood trembling, his breaths ragged as the forest fell eerily silent around him. His legs felt like lead, but he forced himself to move, knowing he needed to find help. With his bike damaged beyond use, he abandoned it and began the grueling journey on foot. Every step sent waves of pain through his body, but he pressed on, driven by the primal need to survive. Hours later, Kevin stumbled onto a nearby trailhead, his vision blurred and his strength fading. A group of hikers found him collapsed on the ground, bloodied and barely conscious. They called for help, and Kevin was airlifted to the nearest hospital, where he underwent surgery to repair the deep lacerations on his arm and shoulder. Doctors marveled at his resilience, noting that his quick thinking and use of the bike frame had likely saved his life. The attack left Kevin with physical scars that would never fully fade, but the emotional toll was just as significant. He struggled with nightmares and a heightened sense of vulnerability in the months that followed. However, Kevin refused to let the experience define him solely as a victim. Instead, he advocated for trail safety, sharing his story to raise awareness about biking risks in bear country. Through public talks and collaborations with local organizations, Kevin pushed for more bear-friendly trail designs, including better signage, the installation of bear-proof food storage, and education campaigns about wildlife encounters. His efforts sparked meaningful changes, with new measures implemented across popular trails in Wyoming to reduce the likelihood of similar incidents. Looking back on that fateful day, Kevin often reflected on the delicate balance between humans and nature. The wilderness, he realized, was neither cruel nor kind. It simply was. His encounter with the grizzly had been a stark reminder of the power and unpredictability of the natural world, and it left him with a profound respect for the creatures that called it home. The dense wilderness of Montana stretched endlessly in all directions, a tapestry of towering pines, jagged mountains, and vast, empty roads. It was a land of raw beauty and isolation, where nature reigned supreme, and humans were merely visitors passing through. On a crisp autumn morning in 2007, truck driver Dave Thompson rumbled along a lonely highway, hauling a trailer loaded with produce destined for a distant city. The road ahead was quiet, the hum of his engine, the only sound breaking the solitude. Dave had spent years navigating remote routes like these, his life revolving around the rhythm of the open road. A sturdy man in his late 40s, he prided himself on his ability to handle the challenges of long-haul trucking. The isolation suited him, and he relished the moments when he could pull over, stretch his legs, and take in the untouched beauty of the landscapes he traveled through. As the morning wore on, Dave decided to take a break. Spotting a small clearing on the side of the road, he eased his truck to a stop, the hiss of the brakes cutting through the stillness. He climbed from the cab, his boots crunching on gravel as he stretched his arms and shoulders. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and damp earth. He didn't notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the unnatural stillness that had settled over the forest nearby. Unbeknownst to Dave, a grizzly bear had been lurking in the vicinity, its keen sense of smell drawing it toward the truck. As the colder months approached, the massive creature with matted fur and sharp claws roamed the area for food. The scent of produce from Dave's trailer had piqued its interest, and it had been following the vehicle's path from the forest, its hunger sharpening its instincts. Dave turned his back to the trees, oblivious to the danger. He reached into the cab for a thermos of coffee, savoring the brief respite from his journey. The bear, hidden in the underbrush, watched him intently. When Dave moved, it interpreted his actions as a threat, its territorial nature overpowering its initial hesitation. In an instant, the bear charged. The attack came without warning. Dave turned just in time to see the massive creature barreling toward him, its sheer size and speed a horrifying blur. He barely had time to react before the bear collided, knocking him off his feet. The impact sent him sprawling onto the gravel, his breath forced from his lungs in a sharp gasp. The bear wasted no time, its primal instincts driving it to secure what it saw as its territory. Its claws raked across Dave's side, tearing through his jacket and into his flesh. Pain seared through him as he struggled to shield himself, his arms raised in a futile attempt to fend off the onslaught. The bear's teeth sank into his leg and he screamed, echoing into the wilderness. Desperation took hold. Through the haze of pain and adrenaline, Dave's hand groped blindly for anything he could use as a weapon. His fingers closed around the cold steel of a crowbar he had left leaning against the truck's tire. He swung the makeshift weapon with every ounce of strength, striking the bear across its shoulder. The blow caused the animal to pause, momentarily stunned. Dave seized the opportunity, swinging again, connecting with the bear's snout. The grizzly snarled, its eyes wild with rage and confusion. Blood dripped from its muzzle, and it backed away slightly, assessing its prey. Dave struggled to his feet, his body trembling and his breaths ragged. He leaned against the side of the truck for support, the crowbar held tightly in his bloodied hands. But the bear wasn't finished. It lunged again, swiping at Dave with a massive paw. The force of the blow sent him crashing back to the ground, his head striking the gravel. Stars danced in his vision, and his grip on the crowbar slackened. The bear loomed over him, its hot breath filling the air, and for a moment, it seemed as though the fight was over. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the bear stopped. Whether it was the lingering pain from Dave's blows or the distant hum of an approaching vehicle, something caused the animal to retreat. It let out a low growl before turning and lumbering back into the forest, its massive frame disappearing into the shadows. Dave lay motionless on the ground, his body a broken testament to the brutality of the attack. Blood pooled around him, staining the gravel as his breaths grew shallow. A passing motorist, alerted by the unusual sight of the parked truck and the commotion, pulled over and rushed to his aid. The man knelt beside Dave, his face pale as he surveyed the extent of the injuries. An emergency call was placed, and paramedics arrived as quickly as the remote location allowed. They worked frantically to stabilize Dave, but the damage was too severe. He had lost too much blood, and the wounds to his side and legs had caused irreversible trauma. Despite their efforts, Dave succumbed to his injuries before he could be transported to a hospital. The news of the attack sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Wildlife experts later confirmed that the bear's behavior had been driven by hunger and the scent of food from the truck. The incident reignited discussions about the dangers of human-wildlife interactions, particularly in areas where natural habitats intersected with human activity. Dave Thompson's tragic death became a somber reminder of nature's unpredictability and the fine line between coexistence and conflict. His story, which was shared widely in the following months, served as a cautionary tale for those venturing into the wilderness, urging respect for the powerful creatures that call it home. 2024. The dry October air was heavy with the scent of sagebrush as Mark and Jason Keller walked the perimeter of their family's remote ranch in the foothills of Wyoming's Wind River Range. The brothers, aged 37 and 34, had grown up on this land, tending livestock and working long days under the wide open skies. They knew it was a life filled with hard labor and moments of quiet beauty. As the sun climbed over the horizon that morning, they set out to check on sheep grazing in a distant pasture near the forest's edge. The ranch bordered miles of wilderness, a landscape teeming with wildlife. The elder brother, Mark, carried a weathered rifle over his shoulder, a precaution more than anything else. Predators were a rare nuisance, and the brothers had grown confident in handling the occasional coyote or stray wolf. Carrying a pitchfork, Jason trailed behind, scanning the landscape for signs of trouble. The sheep were spread across a gentle slope, their bleats punctuating the morning. As they moved closer, they noticed an unusual tension among the herd. The sheep clustered tightly together, their heads low and their movements skittish. Mark stopped, narrowing his eyes at the tree line. That was when they saw it, a large black bear moving through the underbrush. Its sleek fur was matted in places, and a patch of dried blood stained its side. The bear moved awkwardly, its gait uneven. At first, the brothers were surprised. Black bears were not uncommon in this part of Wyoming, but they rarely came so close to human activity, especially during daylight hours. Something about this bear felt different. Its movements were erratic, and its head swung low as if disoriented. Mark's brow furrowed as he whispered instructions to Jason, gesturing toward the sheep. They both understood the importance of protecting the livestock, but neither realized the danger they were walking into. The brothers began shouting, their voices cutting through the crisp air. They banged their tools against rocks and fence posts, hoping to scare the bear off. It seemed to hesitate momentarily, lifting its head to look at them. But instead of retreating, the bear's posture shifted. Its ears flattened against its head, and it let out a low, guttural growl that rumbled through the valley. It charged. Mark barely had time to react before the bear closed the distance, barreling into him with the force of a freight train. The impact knocked him to the ground, his rifle skidding out of reach. The bear's claws raked across his chest, tearing through his coat and into the flesh beneath. Mark screamed, the sound raw and primal, as he struggled to fend off the massive animal. Jason froze for a split second, the scene unfolding like a nightmare. Then instinct took over. He gripped the pitchfork tightly and thrust the sharp tines at the bear's side. The bear roared, reverberating in Jason's chest like thunder, but it did not relent. It turned its massive head toward him, its dark eyes blazing with fury, and swiped with one powerful paw. The blow sent Jason sprawling, the pitchfork flying from his hands. Pain exploded in his shoulder as he hit the ground, but he forced himself to get up. Blood oozed from his arm, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He reached for a nearby rock and hurled it at the bear, aiming for its head. The stone struck its mark, and for a moment, the bear recoiled. Mark lay motionless on the ground, his breath shallow and labored. Jason staggered toward his brother, his eyes darting between Mark's broken body and the enraged bear. He grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it wildly as the bear advanced again. Desperation fueled his every movement, but the bear was relentless, its injuries and hunger driving it into a frenzy. The fight was brutal and chaotic, the ground around them torn and bloodied. Jason managed to land a few blows, but each effort only seemed to agitate the bear further. It lunged at him, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Jason fell backward, the branch clutched in his trembling hands as the bear loomed over him. He could feel its hot breath, smell the coppery tang of its blood mixed with his own. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the attack ended. The bear stood over Jason momentarily longer, its body heaving with exertion. Its eyes seemed to glaze over as it sniffed the air, and then it turned and lumbered back toward the forest. The brothers were left in the eerie silence of the aftermath, the only sounds of their ragged breathing and the distant bleating of the sheep. Jason crawled to Mark, his heart sinking at the sight of his brother's lifeless eyes staring up at the sky. He pressed his hand to Mark's chest, but there was no heartbeat, no sign of life. Tears blurred his vision as he realized he was too late. Despite his injuries, Jason knew he had to get help. He stumbled to his feet, clutching his bleeding arm, and began the long trek back to the ranch. Every step was agony, but the thought of alerting anyone kept him moving. When he finally reached the ranch house, he collapsed on the porch, his body giving out from pain and exhaustion. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, alerted by a frantic call from Jason's wife. They found Mark's body near the pasture, surrounded by evidence of the violent struggle. Jason was airlifted to the nearest hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery to repair the damage from the bear's claws and teeth. He survived, but the physical and emotional scars would remain with him for the rest of his life. The incident sent shockwaves through the small ranching community. Wildlife experts later determined that the bear had likely been injured in a territorial fight with another bear, leaving it desperate and more aggressive than usual. Its weakened state had driven it closer to human activity in search of an easy meal, leading to the fatal encounter with the Keller brothers. Discussions about wildlife safety and preparedness gained renewed urgency in the following weeks. Ranchers were urged to carry bear spray, and ensure they had clear plans for deterring predators without putting themselves at risk. Jason became a reluctant advocate for these measures, sharing his harrowing story to prevent others from making the same mistakes. Mark's death was a devastating loss, a reminder of the fragile balance between humans and the wild. For Jason, the memory of that day would never fade. The sight of his brother fighting for his life, the deafening roars of the bear, and the realization that even the most experienced outdoors people are not invincible in the face of nature's raw power. In the summer of 1998, the Stevens family embarked on what they believed would be an idyllic retreat in Montana's wilderness. Their rented log cabin was deep in the Absaroka Beartooth Mountains, known for its stunning landscapes, crystal-clear lakes, and thriving wildlife. Mark and Ellen Stevens, along with their two children, 12-year-old Rachel and 8-year-old Timmy, had planned a week of hiking, fishing, and peaceful bonding away from the demands of city life. The first few days of their vacation were everything they had hoped for. They spent their mornings hiking along scenic trails, their afternoons fishing by the river, and their evenings roasting marshmallows by the fire. The dense forest surrounding their cabin was alive with chirping birds and rustling leaves, despite the occasional warning sign about wildlife encounters. The family felt safe, reassured by their distance from civilization and well-stocked supplies. On the fourth day of their trip, they set out for a long hike along a remote trail that wound through towering pines and rocky slopes. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of damp moss and pine needles. Emotionally filled with energy, Timmy often ran ahead, his laughter echoing through the trees. Mark reminded him repeatedly to stay close, but excitement got the better of the young boy. As the family paused to admire a small waterfall, Timmy wandered farther than intended, chasing after a butterfly that fluttered past him. In his pursuit, he unknowingly veered off the main trail and deeper into the woods. When he realized he was alone, his family's laughter had faded into silence. Panic set in as he turned in circles, disoriented by the dense foliage that all looked the same. Back at the waterfall, Ellen glanced around, suddenly noticing Timmy's absence. A sense of dread washed over her. "Mark, where's Timmy?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Rachel pointed down the trail where he had last been seen, but was nowhere in sight. Mark's heart pounded as he called out for his son, his voice rising urgently. When there was no response, they knew they had to act fast. Meanwhile, Timmy's small footsteps crunched against the forest floor as he moved cautiously in search of his family. Then he heard a deep, guttural sound, a low growl that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned slowly and saw a massive grizzly bear standing just a few yards away, its dark eyes locked onto him. The bear's fur was matted, its powerful limbs rippling with muscle as it sniffed the air, detecting the scent of an unfamiliar presence. Timmy froze, his breath catching in his throat. The bear let out a huff, taking a slow step forward, then another, then another. The child had no idea how to react. His instincts told him to run, but his feet felt glued to the ground. Before he could move, the grizzly suddenly lunged, swiping at him with a massive paw. The impact sent Timmy sprawling to the ground, pain shooting through his leg where the bear's claws had raked through his skin. His scream tore through the forest, piercing the air with sheer terror. Mark and Ellen, still searching desperately, heard the cry and broke into a frantic run in the direction of the sound. As they crashed through the underbrush, their worst fears were confirmed. The enormous grizzly was standing over their son, sniffing at his bleeding leg. Mark grabbed a large fallen branch without hesitation and shouted at the top of his lungs, waving the stick wildly. Ellen screamed, arms flailing in a desperate attempt to make themselves appear larger. The bear hesitated, seemingly torn between finishing its assault and retreating. When Mark took a bold step forward, still shouting, the grizzly let out an irritated snort, then turned and lumbered off into the woods. Ellen rushed to Timmy's side, her hands shaking as she examined his injuries. His leg was badly scratched, blood seeping through his torn pants. But to their immense relief, the wounds weren't fatal. Mark scooped his son into his arms, and the family moved as quickly as possible back toward the cabin, adrenaline driving them forward despite exhaustion and fear. By the time they reached their vehicle, Timmy was weak and pale, his body trembling from shock. They wasted no time driving to the nearest hospital, where doctors cleaned and stitched his wounds. Though he would recover physically, the emotional trauma of the attack would linger for years to come. The family cut their vacation short, realizing the fragility of their safety in the untamed wilderness. They had come to Montana seeking a peaceful escape, but had instead experienced a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability. Timmy, once fearless, became more cautious, forever carrying the scars of his encounter with the grizzly. Mark and Ellen, too, were changed, their respect for the wild deepened by the harrowing ordeal. As they drove from the cabin, Rachel stared out the window, watching the towering pines fade into the distance. Their retreat had become entirely different, an unforgettable lesson in survival, the raw power of nature, and the thin line between adventure and peril. In the autumn of 2011, deep in the rugged wilderness of Oregon's Cascade Mountains, Tom Grayson, a seasoned park ranger, led a search and rescue operation to find a missing hiker. The vast, untamed landscape was breathtaking and treacherous, known for its dense forests, hidden ravines, and unpredictable wildlife. Over the years, Tom had seen many cases of lost hikers, but this one felt different. The missing man, Daniel Harper, had been alone for 3 days, and with dropping temperatures and reports of increased bear activity, time was running out. Tom and a team of 4 experienced rangers moved methodically through the thick underbrush, scanning for any sign of Daniel. The terrain was unforgiving. Loose soil, jagged rocks, and thick roots made every step a challenge. Hours passed with no sign of the missing man. Then, just as the sun dipped below the tree line, one of the team members spotted a torn jacket snagged on a branch near a steep ravine. It was Daniel's. The team descended carefully, their flashlights slicing through the growing darkness. The ravine's floor was littered with fallen leaves and damp earth, the air thick with the scent of pine. Then a noise, a low growl, froze Tom in his tracks. A massive black bear loomed near a carcass, its dark eyes locking onto Tom with unmistakable hostility. The bear had been feeding, and their sudden arrival had disturbed it. Before Tom could react, the bear lunged, swiping at him with its powerful claws. The force sent him sprawling into the dirt, pain exploding through his ribs. The rest of the team shouted, waving their arms, trying to deter the animal, but it was too late. The bear had its sights on Tom. The beast advanced, its growl reverberating through the ravine. Tom scrambled for his radio, but the bear struck again, sinking its teeth into his arm. Agony shot through him as he struggled to fight back, kicking and twisting to free himself. One of the rangers, Eric Lawson, acted fast. He fired a warning shot into the air, startling the bear. The animal hesitated, its grip on Tom loosening just enough for him to pull free. Blood dripped from his wounds, his vision blurred with pain. The bear, still agitated, circled, unsure whether to retreat or attack again. Eric and the others stood their ground, rifles raised, shouting in unison to drive it away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bear turned and lumbered off into the darkness. The team wasted no time. Tom, though wounded, insisted they continue the search. With renewed urgency, they pushed forward. Moments later, they heard a faint voice calling for help. Following the sound, they found Daniel Harper huddled beneath a rocky overhang, weak but alive. His leg was injured from a fall, but he was coherent. Relief washed over the team as they assessed his condition and radioed for extraction. Despite his injuries, Tom helped carry Daniel out of the ravine. The journey back was slow and grueling, every step a battle against exhaustion and pain. By the time they reached the base camp, the first light of dawn was breaking through the trees. Medics quickly attended to Tom and Daniel, stabilizing them before being transported to the nearest hospital. The experience, however, left Tom deeply reflective. In the days that followed, as he lay in a hospital bed recovering, the weight of what had transpired began to settle. The feeling of the bear's claws raking across his ribs, the pressure of its teeth sinking into his flesh haunted him. But the feeling of helplessness, the realization that despite his training and experience, forces in the wild could overpower even the most seasoned ranger, truly struck him. Nature, for all its beauty, could be a brutal adversary. It was a humbling experience that forced Tom to question his perception of control in such an unpredictable environment. Over time, the physical scars began to heal, but the psychological toll lingered. Tom found himself more cautious and aware of the dangers in the wilderness. He had always respected the wild, but now that respect had deepened into something almost reverential. He knew the wilderness was a realm where man was but a small part of a much larger, often unforgiving ecosystem. He could no longer take for granted that his knowledge and skill would always be enough to keep him safe. In many ways, the incident with the bear had forced him to confront his vulnerability. As weeks turned into months, Tom resumed his duties as a park ranger. His colleagues noticed the change in him, a subtle shift from the confident leader he had been to a more measured, introspective individual. He still led search and rescue missions, but now he took every precaution to avoid unnecessary risks. He shared his experience with the newer rangers, warning them about the unpredictable nature of the wild. His story became a cautionary tale that underscored the importance of respect, preparation, and vigilance. In some ways, Tom had become a legend among his peers, a symbol of courage and the harsh realities of working in such a dangerous environment. Years later, the story of Tom Grayson's brush with death became legend among park rangers. It was a testament to the unpredictability of nature, the thin line between life and death, and the unyielding courage required to face both. But Tom knew that his experience was just one of many in a long history of park rangers who had walked the fine line between man and nature. The wilderness had claimed many lives before him, and would continue to do so long after he was gone. For Tom, the job was more than just a career. It was a calling that required an unwavering commitment to the land and the people who ventured into it. In the summer of 2015, a group of tourists found themselves in one of Earth's most remote and unforgiving places, Spitsbergen, an island in the Svalbard archipelago, deep within the Arctic Circle. The small group of adventurers had traveled to the island to experience the raw beauty of the polar wilderness, a landscape of jagged mountains, glaciers, and vast tundra. Spitsbergen, known for its breathtaking views and the opportunity to see polar wildlife, has become a popular destination for tourists seeking the thrill of true isolation. However, the island's remoteness and harsh environment also meant that danger was always lurking, and the area was home to an unpredictable population of polar bears. The island, part of Norway's Svalbard archipelago, is a land of extremes. The summer months are brief, with perpetual daylight during the period known as the midnight sun. However, these same long days can also make the island an ideal environment for wildlife, particularly the polar bear. The apex predator of the Arctic, polar bears are known to roam vast distances across the ice and tundra in search of food, especially after emerging from their long winter hibernation. During the summer months, their hunger becomes more pronounced, and they are known to venture into human settlements or campsites when food is scarce. On this particular trip, the group consisted of 8 tourists from various countries, guided by a seasoned expert, Erik Thorvaldsen, a local guide with years of experience leading expeditions in Svalbard. The tourists were a mix of thrill seekers and nature enthusiasts, eager to witness the wonders of the Arctic firsthand. They had set up camp near the coast of Spitsbergen, where the rugged landscape of glaciers and mountains loomed in the distance. Their tents were pitched close to the shoreline, offering spectacular views of the icebergs floating in the cold waters below. The group was excited about the adventure, sharing stories around the campfire as the midnight sun bathed the landscape in a surreal golden glow. However, as the night deepened, a sense of unease crept into the group. They had been warned about the risks of polar bear encounters, and the guide, Erik, had briefed everyone on the safety protocols. The group was prepared for a rare but real threat. The camp had been set up with the proper precautions, and firearms were available for defense, although they were only to be used as a last resort. Yet no one expected the danger to come so suddenly, so violently. It was in the dead of night, around 3 a.m., when disaster struck. The group was still awake, some talking quietly and tense, others drifting off to sleep. Suddenly, a loud guttural growl shattered the stillness. The tourists, disoriented and confused, were jolted from their slumber. The bear's heavy footsteps followed the noise as it approached the campsite. The growl became more aggressive, and the bear's breath filled the air. Within seconds, a towering polar bear had emerged, its massive white body visible against the sky. The bear was not just curious, it was hungry, likely driven by the area's long hibernation and food scarcity. The animal had found its way to the camp. It immediately set its sights on one of the tents, where a 17-year-old Greek tourist, Nikos Stavros, had been sleeping. Nico, who had been staying in the middle of the tent cluster, never had a chance to react before the bear lunged. Its powerful claws tore through the fabric, and Nico screamed in terror as the bear's jaws sank into his side. The sound of the attack was deafening in the quiet of the night. The group was in complete panic. Some tourists screamed, while others froze, too stunned to move. Erik, the guide, immediately grabbed the nearest rifle and rushed to Nico's aid. He fired a warning shot to scare the bear away, but it had no effect. The bear, relentless and driven by its primal need to feed, ignored the noise and continued to maul the young tourist. Nico's screams echoed through the campsite, sending waves of fear into the hearts of the remaining tourists. It was clear that the situation was dire. Now fully engaged with Nico, the polar bear dragged him away from the tents. Erik, shouting for the others to stay back, fired a second shot, aiming at the bear. The bullet struck the animal, but the bear barely flinched. The bear paused momentarily, stunned only after a third, more precise shot. Erik seized the opportunity to pull Nico from the bear's grip. However, it was too late. The young tourist was already fatally injured, his body torn apart by the bear's savage attack. The bear, seemingly content with its kill, retreated into the wilderness, leaving the group stunned. The remaining tourists were left in a state of shock, the horror of the attack still sinking in. Eric quickly radioed for help, his voice trembling as he informed the authorities of the tragedy. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, but the harsh conditions and the remote location made any rescue effort slow and dangerous. In the meantime, the group did their best to tend to Nico's body, although they knew there was nothing that could be done. The trauma of the attack was too much to bear. When the rescue team arrived, it was already too late for Nico. The tourists, now shaken and traumatized by the experience, were evacuated from the island. The news of the fatal polar bear attack spread quickly, and it became a somber reminder of the dangers of wildlife in the Arctic. It was one of the few recorded incidents of a polar bear attack on tourists in Svalbard, but the consequences were devastating. The tragedy left a lasting impact on the survivors. Eric, though an experienced guide, struggled with the guilt of being unable to prevent the attack, despite following all the safety protocols. The other tourists, many of whom had been excited to experience the wild beauty of the Arctic, returned home with a deep sense of loss and trauma. Nico's family was devastated by the news, and the event became a reminder of the fine line between adventure and danger in such a harsh, unforgiving environment. In the aftermath of the attack, authorities in Svalbard implemented even stricter guidelines for tourists, emphasizing the importance of safety when traveling in polar bear country. Wildlife experts also raised awareness about the increasing encounters between humans and polar bears, particularly as climate change disrupted the animals' natural habitats. The attack on Nico Stavros, tragic as it was, became a stark reminder of the real and deadly risks that come with venturing into the wilderness of the Arctic. Ryan Carter found himself alone in the remote wilderness of Alaska. What had started as an exciting solo backpacking trip had quickly turned into a fight for survival. Ryan, an experienced outdoor enthusiast in his early 30s, had always been drawn to the wild. He had spent years hiking through forests, mountains, and deserts, pushing his limits to experience the most isolated corners of the world. Alaska had always been his dream destination. The rugged beauty of the land called to him, promising both adventure and solitude. But Alaska's wilderness was unforgiving. Ryan had joined a small group of backpackers to explore the dense forests and snow-covered mountains, but a sudden and unexpected blizzard had separated him from the group. The storm came out of nowhere, transforming the landscape into a whiteout. The howling wind combined with the blinding snow made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Before he knew it, Ryan was alone, cut off from his fellow hikers and had no way to contact them. His radio had been damaged, and the deep snow made any attempt to retrace his steps impossible. Now, days later, the blizzard had passed, but the bitter cold remained. The remote Alaskan wilderness around him stretched for miles in every direction, a vast and harsh terrain of snow, ice, and towering pine trees. Ryan had limited supplies, just a small amount of food, a knife, a fire starter, and a basic shelter. His survival skills were strong, but even the best preparation couldn't erase the deep isolation he now felt. Worse, he knew the area was home to grizzly bears. Ryan was well aware that grizzly bears in Alaska had become more aggressive in recent years. Climate change had affected their food sources, and the bears, struggling to find enough to eat, had been wandering closer to human camps. Ryan had read about these incidents before his trip, but he had never imagined he would face such a danger alone. As he trudged through the snow, his breath heavy in the freezing air, he kept his senses sharp, listening for any signs of movement in the dense forest. It was on one cold evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, that Ryan's worst fear became reality. While searching for a safe place to set up camp, he saw movement in the corner of his eye. A massive grizzly bear emerged from behind the trees, its fur thick and matted, its eyes focused directly on him. Ryan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The bear, clearly hungry and agitated, began to approach. Ryan had no time to think. His instincts kicked in. He knew he couldn't outrun a bear in these conditions. Slowly, he reached for his bear spray, a crucial tool for protection, but the snow made it difficult to move quickly. The bear let out a deep growl and started to close the distance between them. Ryan backed away, trying to maintain eye contact while preparing to defend himself. The encounter turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The bear charged, and Ryan managed to deploy the spray just in time, but the bear was relentless. In the confusion, Ryan stumbled, falling hard into the snow. His arm scraped against the ice, and pain shot through his body as the bear swiped at him. Ryan rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the powerful claws. The bear, disoriented by the spray, backed off for a moment, but Ryan knew it wasn't over. Ryan lay in the snow, his heart racing as the massive grizzly bear shook its head, trying to recover from the bear spray. He knew he had only a few moments to act before the bear regained its full senses. His arm throbbed from the fall, and he could feel the sting of the icy air biting at his skin. But survival instincts took over. Slowly, he inched backward, keeping his eyes on the bear. The animal was clearly agitated, its hunger making it even more dangerous than usual. Ryan knew he had to find shelter, fast. He spotted a small cluster of trees nearby, their thick trunks offering a potential barrier between him and the bear. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to his feet, every movement filled with pain, and stumbled toward the trees. The bear, though still recovering, began to follow. Its deep growls echoed through the forest, a constant reminder of the danger that followed. As Ryan reached the trees, he found a low outcropping of rocks covered in snow, creating a small natural alcove. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He squeezed into the space, using the rocks and trees to shield himself as much as possible. The bear approached, sniffing the air, clearly trying to track him. Ryan's breath came in short bursts, his body shaking from both cold and fear. The bear stopped just outside the trees, pacing back and forth, frustrated by the barrier between them. Ryan pressed himself further into the alcove, hoping the bear would lose interest. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the bear circled, its massive form casting long shadows across the snow. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the bear let out one last growl and turned away, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Exhausted and injured, Ryan stayed in the alcove for hours, unwilling to risk another encounter. As dawn began to break, he cautiously emerged from his hiding spot. His arm was swollen and bruised, and his body ached from the night's ordeal, but he was alive. The encounter with the bear had left him shaken, but he knew he couldn't afford to stop. Survival was now his only focus. As the days passed, Ryan's supplies dwindled, and the harsh wilderness tested every ounce of his endurance. One afternoon, while trying to gather firewood, he stumbled upon a small trail in the snow. Human footprints. With renewed hope, he followed the tracks until he came upon a remote cabin, where he met Maya, a local native Alaskan guide. Maya, skilled in the ways of the land, immediately understood the danger Ryan had faced. Together, Ryan and Maya spent days tracking the signs of grizzly bears in the area. Through their journey, Maya explained the delicate balance between humans and wildlife and how recent environmental changes had forced the bears to become more aggressive. Logging and illegal land development had disrupted the bears' natural food sources, pushing them closer to human territory. On February 11th, 2025, 9 campers from Moscow traveled to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia for a winter camping trip. The group consisted of experienced outdoor enthusiasts and a few first-time campers who wanted to explore the frozen wilderness. They had prepared for extreme weather, packing heavy clothing, food supplies, and survival gear. The journey to the campsite took them deep into the snow-covered forest, surrounded by towering trees and icy rivers. The group was excited to experience the remote beauty of Kamchatka, known for its volcanic landscape and diverse wildlife, including wolves and bears. After a long day of trekking through the thick snow, they finally reached a clearing near a frozen river. They decided to set up their tents under a large tree, thinking the dense branches would provide extra shelter from the cold wind. The snowfall had been heavy that day, covering the ground and tree branches with a thick layer of white. Unaware of the potential danger, they finished setting up camp, built a fire, and spent the evening talking and enjoying the warmth of their tents. As night fell, the temperature dropped even lower, and the wind howled through the trees. The campers settled into their sleeping bags, exhausted from the day's hike. The only sounds were the occasional crackling of the fire and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. The calm, however, would not last long. Sometime in the middle of the night, a loud cracking sound echoed through the forest. The weight of the heavy snow had become too much for one of the thick branches above their tent. The massive branch snapped and came crashing down onto one of the tents, trapping and injuring the campers inside. The sudden noise and impact startled the entire group, jolting them awake in a panic. The unexpected disturbance attracted the attention of a nearby Russian grizzly bear. The region was home to these massive predators, which were known to scavenge for food during the harsh winter months. The bear, thinking the noise had come from an animal, moved toward the camp, its heavy paws crunching through the snow. The campers, confused and frightened, tried to assess the situation. Some scrambled out of their tents, while others stayed frozen in place. The fire had started to die down, casting eerie shadows across the campsite. Before anyone could react, the grizzly burst into the clearing. Its powerful frame was covered in thick fur, and its breath was visible in the freezing air. In a sudden, violent motion, the bear lunged at the nearest person. With a swipe of its massive claws, it tore through the fabric of a tent, dragging one camper out into the snow. Chaos erupted as the rest of the group realized what was happening. Some tried to run, while others yelled in desperation, hoping to scare the predator away. But the bear was relentless, driven by instinct and the scent of fear. The dark forest echoed with the sounds of terror as the attack continued. The massive grizzly moved with terrifying speed through the snow-covered campsite. The injured camper struggled to break free, but the bear's strength was too great. The animal sank its teeth into the victim's shoulder, crushing bone and flesh before dragging the lifeless body deeper into the forest. The other campers, now fully aware of the deadly threat, tried to escape, but the heavy snow slowed their movements. The predator continued its rampage, turning its attention to those still inside the tents. One camper, unable to move in time, was mauled as the bear tore through the fabric, its powerful jaws clamping down with devastating force. Others attempted to flee in different directions, hoping to outrun the danger. Some managed to reach the trees, but for those left behind, there was no chance to react. The cold night air was filled with the sounds of struggle and pain. The bear attacked with relentless aggression, swiping its claws and knocking down several campers before delivering fatal bites. The deep snow turned red as the attack continued. The group, once filled with excitement for their winter adventure, was now fighting for survival against an unstoppable force. Amid the chaos, two of the campers managed to escape into the darkness. Their breath was heavy, and their hands trembled from both fear and the freezing air. They pressed their bodies against the thick tree trunks, hoping to remain unseen. The sounds of destruction behind them grew quieter as the predator focused on the remaining victims. They knew they could do nothing to help their friends now. Their only hope was to survive until morning. Hours passed in complete silence. The cold became unbearable, but the survivors dared not move. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, they carefully stepped out from their hiding place. Their legs were weak, and every step felt heavier than the last. They cautiously approached what was left of their campsite. The scene before them was horrifying. Tents were torn apart, supplies were scattered, and the snow was stained with the aftermath of the brutal attack. The bear was gone, leaving behind only destruction. Shaken and exhausted, the two survivors knew they had to find help. They made their way through the dense forest, walking for hours until they reached a remote ranger station. The authorities were immediately alerted, and a search team was dispatched to the site. When officials arrived, they confirmed the worst. 7 campers had lost their lives in the attack, their bodies left in the snow as evidence of the nightmare that had unfolded. The news of the deadly incident spread quickly, shocking the nation. Experts examined the situation, stating that the heavy snowfall and the fallen tree had unknowingly lured the bear to the campsite. Wildlife officials tracked the predator and took action to prevent further danger. The tragedy led to stronger safety measures for those venturing into the wilderness. The loss of life served as a harsh reminder of the unpredictable nature of the wild. In August 2024, 33-year-old Sean Miller arrived on Kodiak Island, Alaska, ready to enjoy a solo camping trip in one of the most remote and wild places in the United States. He had always been drawn to the outdoors, spending much of his free time hiking, fishing, and exploring nature. Growing up in Montana, he had developed a deep love for the wilderness, and this trip was something he had planned for months. He had read about Kodiak Island's breathtaking landscapes and abundant wildlife, especially the massive Kodiak bears that roamed the area. Sean's campsite was located near a river, a perfect spot for fishing. The water was rich with salmon, making it a prime location for both anglers and wildlife. He spent the day catching fish and enjoying the peacefulness of nature. By evening, he had cleaned and prepared his catch, setting up his cooking station just a few feet from his tent. This was his mistake. He failed to realize that the strong scent of fish could attract predators. As night fell, the air became colder, and the sounds of the wilderness filled the area. Sean sat by his campfire, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. A large Kodiak bear, drawn by the scent of the fish, had been moving closer, its powerful nose leading it straight to his camp. It had been searching for food, and the smell was too strong to ignore. The massive bear, towering over most animals in the region, approached cautiously, staying hidden within the darkness of the trees. Inside the tent, Sean had settled into his sleeping bag. The only sounds were the distant rush of the river and the occasional rustling of leaves. Then, a faint noise came from outside. Something was moving near his camp. Sean assumed it was a small animal searching for scraps, a common occurrence in the wild. He unzipped his tent and stepped outside, holding a flashlight in his hand. As he scanned the area, he spotted movement near the trees. Before he could react, the bear charged. Its powerful legs propelled it forward with terrifying speed. Sean panicked and tried to run, but his foot slipped on the uneven ground. He fell onto a pile of sharp rocks, injuring his leg. Pain shot through him, making it difficult to move. The bear was now only a few feet away. It saw Sean as a threat in its territory. In a matter of seconds, the massive animal reached him. Its sharp claws slashed across his body, knocking him to the ground. He cried out in pain, his voice echoing through the night. The nearby campers rushed toward the scene, their flashlights flickering through the darkness. The sound of their hurried footsteps broke the stillness of the night. As they reached the area, they saw the remains of the struggle. Sean lay motionless on the cold ground, his body covered in deep wounds. The bear had disappeared into the forest, leaving behind only traces of its presence. Blood stained the dirt, and torn pieces of clothing were scattered nearby. The campers immediately tried to help, but it was already too late. One of the campers ran back to his tent to grab a satellite phone. Due to the remote location, there was no cell service, making it difficult to call for emergency assistance. The campers did what they could, covering Sean with a blanket and trying to stop the bleeding. They shouted into the night, hoping someone nearby could offer medical aid. The minutes felt long as they waited for any sign of help. Hours later, rescue teams finally arrived after receiving an emergency call from a ranger station miles away. A helicopter was sent to the location, landing near the campsite. The responders assessed the situation and confirmed the tragic outcome. Sean had succumbed to his injuries before help could reach him. His body was carefully placed on a stretcher and airlifted out of the area. The campers who had witnessed the aftermath stood in silence, still in shock over what had happened. Authorities launched an immediate search for the bear responsible for the attack. Local wildlife officials set up tracking teams to locate the animal, fearing it might pose a threat to others. Footprints in the dirt and signs of disturbed vegetation led them deeper into the forest. After several hours of searching, they spotted the massive Kodiak bear. The animal showed no fear of humans, which raised concerns among the experts. Since it had already attacked once, officials made the decision to remove it from the area. The bear was later euthanized to prevent any future attacks. News of the incident spread quickly, reaching people far beyond Kodiak Island. Wildlife experts used the tragedy to educate the public about safety measures in bear territory. They emphasized the importance of proper food storage and keeping campsites clean to avoid attracting dangerous animals. Local authorities reminded visitors to follow strict guidelines when exploring remote locations. Sean's family was informed about the incident, and they struggled to come to terms with the loss. Friends and relatives shared memories of him, recalling his passion for the outdoors and love for adventure. A memorial was planned in his hometown to honor his life. The attack left a lasting impact on those who had been at the campsite that night. Many of them chose not to return to the area, haunted by the memory of what had happened. The wilderness remained as it always had, vast and unpredictable. The tragic event served as a reminder of the risks that came with venturing into nature, where survival often depended on understanding the dangers that lurked in the wild. In July 2024, Emily Harris, a 40-year-old resident of Asheville, North Carolina, started her morning like any other. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood near the Blue Ridge Mountains, an area surrounded by forests and rolling hills. Emily had always loved nature and enjoyed the peaceful environment of her town. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, spending most of her time indoors. Walking her dog, a loyal golden retriever named Max, was her favorite way to relax. That morning the air was warm, and the sun was just beginning to rise. Birds chirped in the trees, and the streets were empty except for a few early risers. Emily had taken this route many times before, passing by the familiar houses and well-maintained gardens. The neighborhood bordered a wooded area where wild animals were sometimes spotted. Deer, raccoons, and even the occasional bear had been seen, but they usually stayed away from humans. As she walked, Emily let Max explore the grass along the sidewalk. He sniffed around, his tail wagging happily. Suddenly, he stopped. His ears perked up, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Emily followed his gaze toward the dense trees lining the path. Before she could react, a black bear emerged from the underbrush. The bear looked young, possibly searching for food. It had likely wandered too close to the neighborhood and was startled by Max's barking. For a brief moment, Emily and the bear locked eyes. Fear shot through her body, but she knew she had to stay calm. Max barked louder, pulling at his leash, trying to protect her. The bear, seemingly confused and alarmed, made a sudden move. In its panic, it charged forward, knocking Emily off balance. She fell to the ground, her arms scraping against the pavement. The bear, swiping in an attempt to move past her, left a deep scratch on her arm before bolting back into the woods. Pain shot through Emily's arm as she struggled to get up. Max stood beside her, his protective stance unshaken. The bear was gone, but the attack had left her shaken. She took deep breaths, trying to steady herself. The morning, which had started so peacefully, had turned into a terrifying experience. With Max by her side, she forced herself to her feet. Her arm throbbed, blood dripping from the deep wound. She clutched it with her other hand, realizing she needed medical attention. She hurried back to her house, her heart still pounding. The neighborhood remained quiet, unaware of what had just happened. Emily reached her doorstep, breathing heavily as she opened the door. The safety of her home had never felt more comforting. She grabbed her phone and called for help. The reality of the attack settling in. The peaceful streets of Asheville had just witnessed a rare and frightening encounter. The bear had vanished, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would stay with Emily forever. Emily sat on her couch, pressing a clean towel against her injured arm. The pain was sharp, but she was more shaken by what had happened. Her heart was still beating fast, and Max sat beside her, watching her closely. The peaceful neighborhood she had always felt safe in now felt different. The bear had come too close, and the thought of what could have happened made her uneasy. Soon, emergency responders arrived. They carefully cleaned and treated the deep scratch on her arm. The wound was not life-threatening, but it would take time to heal. They advised her to monitor it for any signs of infection and reminded her to report the incident to local wildlife officials. Bears were common in the area, but attacks were rare. Authorities needed to know about any encounters to keep people safe. Later that day, Emily contacted wildlife officials, explaining everything that had happened. They took her report seriously and assured her they would investigate. Black bears were usually not aggressive unless provoked, but sudden encounters could be dangerous. The bear that had attacked Emily was likely young and inexperienced. It had panicked when surprised by the barking dog. Officials explained that during summer, bears wandered into suburban areas searching for food. People were often unaware that simple things like garbage or pet food could attract them. News of the attack spread quickly through the neighborhood. Emily's neighbors were shocked that something like this had happened so close to their homes. Many had seen bears from a distance, but had never imagined one would come this near. Some people became fearful, worried that another bear might appear, while others took the incident as a reminder to be more careful when walking near wooded areas. Wildlife experts visited the area the next day, looking for any signs of the bear. They checked the woods near the neighborhood, but found no sign of it. They believed it had moved deeper into the forest. To prevent future encounters, they placed warning signs around the area and advised residents to remove anything that might attract bears, such as bird feeders and unsecured trash bins. Emily tried to return to her normal routine, but the memory of the attack stayed with her. She became more cautious when taking Max for walks, avoiding areas near the trees and always carrying a whistle, as experts had suggested. Though she still loved nature, she now saw it with a new awareness. Over time, the neighborhood adjusted. People remained alert but did not let fear control them. Wildlife officials continued monitoring the area, reminding residents of the importance of coexisting safely with nature. The bear was never seen again, but its sudden appearance had left a lasting impact. Emily healed, both physically and mentally, but she never forgot that morning. The quiet streets of Asheville had witnessed a rare moment of danger, a reminder that even the most peaceful places could hold unexpected risks. The Siberian wilderness in January is a place of profound stillness where the frozen expanse stretches endlessly, interrupted only by patches of dense forest and the occasional rugged outcrop. The snow-covered terrain, glittering under a pale sun, hides a dangerous secret. It is home to the Russian grizzly bear, a creature as majestic as it is deadly. On January 9, 2025, a team of 7 wildlife officers experienced in managing these powerful animals ventured into this forbidding landscape on a routine relocation mission. What unfolded that day would forever change the way such operations were conducted. The group, led by Ivan Tikhonov, a seasoned officer with over a decade of experience in wildlife management, included Viktor Gorsky, a tranquilizer specialist, Alexei Petrov, a logistics coordinator, Dmitry Sorokin, a veterinarian, Yuri Karpov, a tracker, Pavel Mikhailov, a driver, and Andrei Volkov, the youngest of the team, eager to prove himself. Their task was straightforward yet dangerous: relocate a Russian grizzly bear that had wandered too close to human settlements. The bear had recently been spotted near the outskirts of a small Siberian village, scavenging for food, its natural habitat likely disturbed by illegal logging. The officers traveled in 2 sturdy vehicles, equipped with tranquilizer guns, safety equipment, and a reinforced cage for transporting the bear. They arrived at the forest's edge in the early morning, the air biting and heavy with the promise of snow. The officers parked their vehicles safely from the bear's den, relying on Yuri's tracking skills to lead them to the site. The plan was to tranquilize the bear, secure it in the transport cage, and release it in a remote area far from human activity. The den was nestled in a thicket of trees, partially hidden by snow and undergrowth. The officers moved cautiously, their breaths visible in the frigid air, their boots crunching softly against the snow. Ivan instructed the team to spread out, positioning themselves strategically to block the bear's escape routes. The atmosphere was tense but focused. They had done this many times before. As the group prepared their equipment, Pavel, distracted by a crackling message on the radio, accidentally left the driver's door of one vehicle ajar. It was a small oversight, but one with catastrophic consequences. Unbeknownst to the team, the bear, already on edge from the commotion near its den, had been watching them. Drawn by the scent of food left in the vehicle, it emerged suddenly from the thicket, a massive, hulking figure against the snowy backdrop. The first officer to notice the bear was Victor, who warned the others. The bear, agitated and aggressive, charged directly toward the open vehicle. The team scrambled to deploy their tranquilizers, but the situation rapidly descended into chaos. The bear's sheer speed and ferocity caught them off guard. Before anyone could react, it reached the vehicle, its powerful claws ripping through the seats as it searched for the source of the scent. Pavel, attempting to retrieve the tranquilizer gun from the back of the vehicle, became the bear's first target. The animal lunged at him, its massive jaws clamping down on his shoulder, dragging him to the ground. The team, horrified but determined, tried to intervene. Ivan and Victor fired tranquilizer darts, but the thick fur and adrenaline-fueled rage of the bear rendered the initial doses ineffective. Alexei and Dmitry rushed to assist Pavel, but the bear swiped at them with terrifying force, its claws tearing through their protective clothing. The clearing erupted into a frenzy of shouts and growls. The snow stained crimson as the bear turned its attention to the remaining officers. Yuri and Andrei, positioned farther from the vehicle, attempted to flank the animal, hoping to draw it away from their fallen comrades. Andrei, armed with a tranquilizer gun, managed to land a shot on the bear's flank, but it only seemed to enrage the creature further. The bear charged at him, knocking him to the ground before Yuri could react. Seeing his team overwhelmed, Ivan shouted orders to regroup, but the bear's ferocity left little room for coordination. One by one, the officers fell, their attempts to subdue the animal futile against its raw power. The bear, its primal instincts fully awakened, delivered swift and devastating blows, leaving no chance for survival. The attack lasted mere minutes but felt like an eternity. When the bear finally retreated into the dense forest, the clearing was silent, save for the wind and the soft patter of falling snow. The 7 officers' bodies lay scattered, their equipment broken, and their mission tragically unfinished. A search team discovered the scene hours later, sending shockwaves through Russia's wildlife management community. The scale of the tragedy was unprecedented, raising urgent questions about the safety protocols for handling dangerous predators in remote regions. Investigators determined that the bear's heightened aggression was likely due to its disrupted habitat and the stress of human intrusion near its den. The open vehicle door and the scent of food only exacerbated the situation, creating a perfect storm of circumstances that led to the attack. The loss of Ivan, Victor, Alexei, Dmitry, Yuri, Pavel, and Andrei devastated their families, colleagues, and the broader conservation community. Vigils were held in their honor, and their names became a solemn reminder of the risks faced by those who work to protect and manage wildlife. The incident spurred significant changes in safety protocols, including mandatory double checks of all vehicles and equipment, increased use of remote tranquilizer delivery systems, and enhanced training for officers on handling high-stress encounters with predators. In the aftermath, the bear was not pursued. Wildlife experts argued that the attack was not the result of malice, but rather a tragic intersection of human error and instinct. The forest, as unforgiving as it is beautiful, had simply reminded humanity of its place in the natural order. Though tragic, the deaths of the 7 officers led to greater awareness and improvements in how dangerous predators were managed, ensuring that their sacrifice was not in vain. The morning air along Bear Creek in Colorado was crisp and invigorating, carrying the earthy scent of pine trees and damp soil. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden light over the rugged terrain that bordered the winding creek. Park Ranger Claire Thompson, 29, had been assigned to this stretch of wilderness for the past 3 years and intimately knew its paths, wildlife, and rhythms. Despite the challenges of patrolling such a vast area, Claire loved her work. She found solace in the quiet beauty of nature, a stark contrast to the chaos of the urban world she had left behind. Bear Creek, nestled within a national forest near Dolores, Colorado, was a haven for wildlife. Elk grazed in open meadows, foxes darted through underbrush, and black bears roamed the forested slopes. However, one particular bear had been sighted closer to human activity recently. Reports trickled in of a large black bear foraging near campsites and picnic areas, drawn by the smell of food left behind by careless visitors. Though the bear hadn't displayed overtly aggressive behavior, its increasing proximity to people had become a concern. Claire was tasked with monitoring the situation during her routine patrol. That morning, Claire was equipped with her standard gear, a radio, a first aid kit, and bear spray holstered to her side. Her route followed the creek's winding course, where she stopped periodically to check for signs of wildlife activity. Tracks, scat, and claw marks on tree trunks told her the bear had been nearby recently, but she saw no immediate danger. Her footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path as she moved deeper into the forest, the tranquility of the environment wrapping around her like a warm blanket. About an hour into her patrol, Claire noticed a movement up ahead. Through a gap in the trees, she spotted the black bear lumbering along the creek's edge, its powerful frame silhouetted against the dappled sunlight. It was larger than she had anticipated, its glossy coat rippling with each step. The bear appeared calm, sniffing at the ground and occasionally pawing at rocks for food. Claire paused, her breath catching at the sight of the majestic creature. It was a rare opportunity to observe such a magnificent animal up close. Claire's training had emphasized maintaining a safe distance from wildlife, but in the moment, her instincts faltered. The bear didn't seem agitated or aware of her presence. She reached for her camera, a habit born of her love for photography and documenting her experiences in the field. She moved slowly, angling for a better shot, creeping closer as the bear continued foraging. The thrill of the moment clouded her judgment, and she failed to notice subtle signs in the bear's behavior. Its ears twitching, its head lifting, and its body tensing as it became aware of her presence. Suddenly, the bear turned. Its dark eyes locked onto Claire, and the air thickened with tension. She froze, her heart pounding as she realized her mistake. The bear huffed, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the forest. In an instant, the animal charged. The bear's speed was staggering, and its powerful legs propelled it forward with terrifying force. Claire barely had time to react. She stumbled backward, reaching for her bear spray, but the bear was too quick. It collided with her, and its massive weight knocked her to the ground. The impact sent her head crashing against a rock, and darkness consumed her vision as she lost consciousness. Another park ranger, Ian Fuller, was conducting patrol along a separate trail nearby when he heard the commotion. The sounds of snapping branches and guttural roars cut through the forest's stillness, followed by a sharp, desperate cry that sent chills down his spine. Ian sprinted toward the source of the noise, his boots pounding against the uneven ground. When he arrived, the scene before him was harrowing. The bear stood over Claire's motionless body, its claws raking at the ground and its breath coming in heavy bursts. Ian's mind raced as he weighed his options. He knew firing a weapon at the bear would be a last resort, potentially escalating the situation. Instead, he raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack of the gunshot reverberated through the forest, startling the bear. It paused, its ears flicking as it assessed the new threat. Ian shouted and waved his arms, making himself appear larger to intimidate the animal. The bear huffed again, its breath visible in the cool air, before turning and retreating into the dense underbrush. The forest fell silent once more, except for Ian's ragged breathing. Ian rushed to Claire's side, his stomach twisting at the sight of her injuries. Blood seeped from a deep wound on her forehead, and her uniform was torn where the bear's claws had raked across her torso. She was still alive, her breath shallow and labored. Ian radioed for emergency assistance, his voice trembling as he relayed their location. Paramedics arrived within the hour, navigating the rugged terrain with difficulty. Claire was carefully stabilized and airlifted to the nearest hospital, where a team of surgeons worked tirelessly to save her. Despite their efforts, the extent of her injuries proved too severe. Claire succumbed to her wounds later that evening, leaving behind a grieving community and a legacy of dedication to the wilderness she had loved. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the Park Service and the local community. Investigations revealed that Claire's proximity to the bear had triggered its defensive instincts, a sobering reminder of the inherent dangers of wildlife encounters in natural habitats. The incident underscored the importance of adhering to safety guidelines, respecting the boundaries of wild animals, and maintaining a safe distance at all times. The crisp autumn air in a national park located in interior Alaska carried the scent of pine and earth as Adrian Forster, a 34-year-old outdoor enthusiast, ventured deep into Alaska's untamed wilderness. A seasoned hiker with years of experience exploring rugged terrain, Adrian craved solitude and the kind of peace that only untouched landscapes could provide. On this particular trip, he sought to push himself further than ever, trekking miles beyond the park's marked trails into the heart of the wild. His pack was heavy with supplies, maps, a first aid kit, a satellite phone, and food. He carried bear spray on his hip and a knife in his pocket, a small comfort in an environment where the line between predator and prey blurred. In early September 2024, the weather was ideal for hiking. The days were still warm enough to be pleasant, and the nights were cool enough to make the stars seem brighter. Adrian had meticulously planned this trip, poring over maps and weather reports, ensuring every detail of his journey was accounted for. Yet no amount of preparation could account for the unpredictable nature of the wilderness he loved so dearly. Adrian had been hiking for hours that day, following a remote ridge that provided sweeping views of the valleys below. Rolling tundra hills stretched out in every direction, a patchwork of golden grass and dark green spruce. He paused occasionally to take in the scenery, his breath hitching at the sight of distant snow-capped peaks. The only sounds were the crunch of his boots on the dirt and the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. But as the afternoon wore on, a strange stillness settled over the landscape. The usual chatter of birds and the distant calls of animals faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that set his nerves on edge. The unease was initially subtle, an instinctual awareness that something was out of place. Adrian shrugged it off, reminding himself that the wilderness was inherently unpredictable. He adjusted the straps of his pack and pressed onward, his eyes scanning the ground for signs of wildlife. He had seen bear tracks earlier in the day, but they were old, the edges worn by rain and time. He reasoned that the bear was long gone, likely far from his current location. Then, as Adrian rounded a bend in the ridge, he saw it. A shadow emerged from the trees below, massive and unmistakable, a grizzly bear. Its golden brown coat glistened in the sunlight, and its powerful muscles rippled as it moved. It seemed unaware of Adrian's presence for a moment, its head low as it sniffed the air. But then, the bear's head snapped up, and its dark eyes locked onto him. The moment stretched, heavy and charged, as the bear assessed him from a distance. Adrian's heart pounded as he froze, trying to remember his training. He knew the bear hadn't charged yet, and there was still a chance to defuse the situation. But before he could move, the bear reared up, its massive frame towering above the ground, and let out a deep, guttural roar that echoed across the ridge. The time for strategy was gone. The bear dropped to all fours and charged. Adrian turned and ran, knowing full well that it was futile. His legs burned as he sprinted downhill, the terrain uneven and treacherous. His pack felt like dead weight, slowing him as the bear closed the gap with terrifying speed. He reached for his bear spray, fumbling with the clasp as his mind raced. The bear was on him before he could raise the canister, its momentum knocking him to the ground. The impact drove the air from Adrian's lungs as he hit the earth, pain radiating through his body. The bear's claws raked across his back, tearing through his jacket and skin. He tried to roll away, but the animal pinned him with its massive paw, its breath hot and rancid against his neck. Desperation took hold as Adrian reached for the knife in his pocket, his fingers trembling as they found the handle. He managed to unsheath the blade and swung blindly, the sharp edge slicing into the bear's shoulder. The grizzly roared in pain, momentarily retreating, but its anger grew. It lunged again, this time clamping its jaws around Adrian's leg. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot fire that consumed him as the bear shook its head violently, dragging him across the dirt. Adrian's vision blurred as he swung the knife again, this time striking the bear's face. The blade cut into its cheek, and the animal let go, growling as it backed away. Adrian seized the moment, his body screaming in protest as he crawled toward a nearby boulder. He pressed his back against it, using it as a barrier between himself and the bear. His hands fumbled for the bear spray, finally freeing it from its holster. The bear circled him, its growls low and menacing movements deliberate. Blood dripped from its wounds, staining the dirt beneath its paws. Adrian raised the canister, his hand shaking as he prepared to fire. But before he could act, the bear charged again, its massive body colliding with the boulder. The impact force sent Adrian sprawling, the canister flying from his grip. He scrambled to his feet, but his injured leg buckled beneath him. The bear loomed over him, its teeth bared and eyes wild. Adrian raised his knife one last time, but his strength was gone. The animal struck him with a devastating blow, and the world darkened. Days later, a search team found Adrian's body near the ridge. His pack lay nearby, its contents scattered across the ground, and claw marks scarred the surrounding rocks. The grizzly was nowhere to be seen, having returned to the forest after the attack. Adrian's death sent shockwaves through the park and the wider outdoor community. He had been experienced, prepared and cautious, yet none of it had been enough to save him from the unpredictable dangers of the wild. Following the tragedy, park officials urged hikers to take even greater precautions when venturing into grizzly territory. They emphasized the importance of traveling in groups, making noise to avoid surprising wildlife, and carrying bear spray within easy reach. Adrian's story became a sobering reminder of nature's raw power and the thin line between adventure and survival. For those who followed in his footsteps, the wilderness would never feel the same. In the autumn of 2006, deep in the heart of Russia's Sikhote-Alin Mountains, Vladimir Kozlov prepared for what he expected to be another ordinary hunting expedition. The region, known for its rugged terrain and dense forests, was home to one of the most dangerous predators in the world, the Russian grizzly bear. Vladimir, a seasoned hunter and outdoorsman, had spent years navigating these treacherous landscapes, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. Vladimir had set out early in the morning, his rifle slung over his shoulder as he moved through the thick underbrush. His objective was simple: capture footage of the elusive Russian grizzly in its natural habitat. Equipped with a high-powered rifle and a camera strapped to his backpack, he planned to document the bear's movements while ensuring his safety. He had always been careful in his approach, understanding that even the most experienced hunters were not immune to the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. By midday, he had followed fresh tracks leading toward a small clearing by a fast-moving stream. Kneeling beside the water, he studied the tracks carefully, noting their size and depth. This bear was massive. He felt the weight of his rifle and took a steadying breath. The air was crisp, the silence almost eerie, save for the distant calls of birds overhead. Then, without warning, the quiet was shattered. A guttural roar echoed through the trees, followed by the unmistakable sound of branches snapping under immense weight. Before Vladimir could react, a massive Russian grizzly burst from the foliage, its golden-brown fur bristling in the sunlight. Its black eyes locked onto him, filled with a terrifying mixture of rage and predatory instinct. He had heard stories of these bears charging without provocation, and now he was living that nightmare. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. His survival depended on his reaction in the next few seconds. As the bear charged forward, Vladimir instinctively raised his rifle, his fingers tightening around the trigger. The bear's sheer size made it seem like a moving mountain, each step shaking the ground beneath him. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands remained steady. He fired. The rifle's deafening crack echoed through the valley, and the impact was immediate. The bullet struck the bear square in the chest, its force stopping the beast mid-charge. For a moment it stood frozen, its massive form wavering as blood spurted from the wound. Then with a final strangled grunt, the bear collapsed onto its side, the life draining from its powerful body within seconds. Vladimir stood there, his breath in ragged gasps, his rifle still raised. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, mixing with the musky scent of the fallen bear. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. He lowered his rifle, taking a cautious step forward. The bear lay still, its great form now nothing more than a motionless mass. His hands trembled as he exhaled. He had encountered bears before, but none had come at him with such raw aggression. He knew he would not be standing there if he had hesitated momentarily. His weapon, a customized .375 caliber rifle, had saved his life in mere seconds. The sheer power of the shot had left no room for resistance. As the reality of what had just transpired settled in, Vladimir knew he had to document the scene. He removed the camera from his backpack and captured images of the bear and its surroundings. The photos were a sobering reminder of nature's untamed brutality and the fine line between life and death in the wilderness. Hours later, as he returned to his cabin, he couldn't shake the thought of how different this day could have ended. He had been lucky. That night, as he sat by the fire, sipping a bottle of vodka to steady his nerves, he reflected on the encounter. It was a story he would tell for years, a harrowing testament to the power of man and beast. But above all, it was a reminder that survival often came down to mere seconds in the wild. Over the next few days, Vladimir's mind was plagued with the memory of the attack. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bear's furious charge, the gleam of its fangs, the sheer weight of its presence. The thought of what could have happened if he had missed his shot gnawed at him. He had seen veteran hunters lose their lives in less intense encounters. Despite his years of experience, he realized how little control humans truly had in the face of nature's raw force. He returned to the clearing the following morning, driven by an urge to understand the encounter better. The bear's body remained undisturbed, its massive frame a grim reminder of the dangers lurking in the wild. Kneeling beside it, he traced the fur with his gloved hand, feeling the raw power that had once surged through the beast. He murmured a quiet acknowledgement, not out of victory but of respect. This bear had lived by the laws of the wilderness, just as he had, and the same harsh rules dictated its end. Back in town, he shared his experience with fellow hunters and conservationists, sparking discussions on the unpredictable nature of the Russian wilderness. Some commended his skill, while others questioned whether such close encounters should be risked. It was a debate as old as time, man versus nature, survival versus conservation. He listened but spoke little. Words did not fully capture the weight of what had happened in those few terrifying seconds. As the years passed, Vladimir's fateful encounter became a legend among local hunters. His name was whispered in campfire stories, his survival recounted as both a warning and an awe-inspiring feat. But for Vladimir, the experience left a deeper imprint. The memory of the bear's charge, the echo of his rifle, and the haunting stillness that followed would remain with him for the rest of his days. He continued hunting, but never again took his surroundings for granted. He understood now, more than ever, that life and death were separated by mere seconds in the heart of the wilderness. In the summer of 1997, deep in the remote wilderness of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, Vadim Petrov, a seasoned park ranger, patrolled the dense forests with his longtime partner, Nikolai Ivanov. The vast, untamed expanse of Kamchatka was home to one of the world's highest populations of brown bears, powerful and unpredictable creatures that ruled the wilderness. Vadim had spent over a decade protecting the land, studying its wildlife, and guiding visitors through its breathtaking yet perilous terrain. On a crisp afternoon, Vadim and Nikolai followed a narrow trail winding through the forest, watching for signs of disturbance. Recent reports of an aggressive bear near a popular hiking route had prompted them to investigate. As they moved deeper into the woods, they found fresh tracks, massive imprints in the damp earth, the telltale claw marks sending a chill down Vadim's spine. The bear they were tracking was enormous, far larger than most had encountered. A sudden deafening crash shattered the forest's stillness as they rounded a bend. A colossal brown bear emerged from the undergrowth, its golden brown fur bristling, its dark eyes locked onto them with unmistakable hostility. The beast had been lying in wait, possibly guarding a kill. The realization came too late. Before either man could react, the bear lunged forward with terrifying speed. Vadim instinctively raised his rifle, his pulse hammering in his ears, but the beast was already upon him. A massive paw struck him with bone-crushing force, sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain shot through his body as the bear's weight bore down on him, its rancid breath hot against his face. Nikolai fired a warning shot, the gun's report echoing through the trees, but the bear was unfazed. It was in a frenzy now, a towering force of unrelenting fury. As the bear's powerful jaws snapped inches from his face, Vadim fought desperately, driving his hands against the beast's thick fur, trying to push it away. The struggle was futile. The bear was too strong. Nikolai, heart pounding, took careful aim and fired another shot, this time hitting the bear's shoulder. The creature roared in pain but remained relentless. Nikolai knew he had only seconds to save his partner. With unwavering focus, he fired again, striking the bear in the side of the head. The massive beast staggered, its body trembling from the force of the impact. A guttural growl escaped its throat before it finally collapsed beside Vadim, motionless. Nikolai rushed to Vadim's side, his hands shaking as he assessed the damage. Vadim's face was pale, his uniform torn and bloodied from deep lacerations on his arm and torso. He gasped for breath, his body growing weaker with each passing second. Nikolai hoisted Vadim up, his body straining under the weight, but he knew the truth. His friend was slipping away. He radioed for emergency assistance, knowing they had to move quickly. The nearest ranger station was miles away, and Vadim's wounds were too severe. Despite Nikolai's desperate efforts, Vadim succumbed to his injuries before they could reach help. The loss devastated Nikolai, who had worked with Vadim for years, sharing the trials and triumphs of life in the wild. The days that followed were marked by profound silence. The ranger station felt emptier without Vadim's presence, laughter and steady confidence in the face of nature's dangers. The other rangers grieved in their ways, some in quiet reflection, others in their stories about his unwavering dedication to the land. A memorial was erected near the trail where he had fallen, a simple wooden carving of a bear with Vadim's name etched into its base. Nikolai was never the same after that day. The guilt weighed on him, despite knowing he had done everything he could. He replayed the moment repeatedly, wondering if a faster shot, a different strategy, or a louder warning could have made a difference. But the wilderness was indifferent to human regrets. The Kamchatka Peninsula had claimed another life, and all left were the echoes of Vadim's legacy. Despite his grief, Nikolai remained dedicated to the work he and Vadim had once shared. He took on the role of mentor to younger rangers, instilling the same respect for nature that Vadim had carried. He recounted his partner's final moments, not as a story of defeat, but as a lesson, one that no matter how skilled or prepared one might be, the wild was never to be underestimated. There were times when Nikolai considered leaving the ranger service altogether. Still, something always pulled him back. The land, the animals, the essence of what he and Vadim had protected for so many years. He found solace in his work, though the forests never felt the same. Each time he spotted a bear in the distance, he felt a deep, unspoken connection, a reminder that Vadim's spirit still lingered among the towering pines and rolling rivers. Even after years had passed, Nikolai often returned to the same forests where he and Vadim had once walked together. He would stand in silence among the towering pines, reflecting on the moment that had forever changed him. The scars of loss remained, but so did the memories, the camaraderie, the lessons, and the unyielding respect for the land that had claimed his friend's life. Though Vadim was gone, his legacy endured in the stories told by those who followed in his footsteps. In Kamchatka's vast and untamed wilderness, his name remained etched in the hearts of those who dared to walk the same path, a reminder that there were no victors in the wild, only those who endured long enough to tell the tale. In the summer of 2014, Laurie Ravenscroft, a seasoned fisherwoman, found herself once again alone on the remote lakes of northern Ontario, Canada. The area, sparsely populated and far from the bustling cities, was known for its stunning scenery and pristine waters. Laurie had spent most of her adult life in these waters, fishing alone on weekends to escape the pressures of modern life. The solitude was her sanctuary, a place where she could clear her mind and immerse herself in the rhythms of nature. The landscape around her was breathtaking. Towering pine trees lined the shores, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The lake, a serene expanse of glassy water, stretched out before her, unbroken except for the ripples caused by her boat's motor as she slowly maneuvered towards her favorite fishing spot. This particular lake, nestled in the wilderness near the Canadian border, was her favorite because of its quietude and the plentiful catch it offered. It was a place few others visited, and for Laurie, its solitude was peaceful and exhilarating. The water was often still, with only the occasional splash of a fish breaking the calm. The sun shone brightly that afternoon, casting a warm glow across the landscape. Laurie was sitting at the edge of her small boat, her fishing rod firmly in hand as she waited for the telltale tug of a fish on the line. The air smelled faintly of pine and fresh water, The only sounds the occasional call of a distant bird and the gentle lap of water against the boat. The stillness was broken only by the steady rhythm of her reeling, a task so familiar to her that it was almost second nature. As she waited for the fish to bite, Lori couldn't help but think about the years she had spent in these woods. Fishing alone had become her ritual, her way of reconnecting with herself and the world around her. She'd fished in all kinds of weather, from the crisp chill of early spring mornings to the humid, sweat-drenched heat of late summer afternoons. Each time she cast her line into the lake, she felt a sense of peace. But that afternoon, something was different. There was a tension in the air, a feeling she couldn't quite place. It was not long before the line jerked, signaling a bite. Lori's pulse quickened as she carefully began reeling in the fish. She knew this could be a big one. A massive shadow moved across the boat as the fish broke the water's surface. Lori barely had time to process what was happening before a black bear appeared at the lake's edge, drawn by the smell of her bait. The bear's nose twitched in the air, and its massive frame seemed to materialize from the thick underbrush on the shore. It wasn't just a bear, a force of nature, its dark fur glistening in the sunlight as it padded forward with determined steps. Startled, Lori immediately stood up, her heart racing. She shouted at the bear, waving her arms to scare it off. The bear seemed more curious than frightened, its dark eyes fixed on her every move as it lumbered closer. Lori's mind raced as she quickly assessed her options. The boat was small, and the bear was closing in too quickly. She had no weapons, and the only thing she could think of to defend herself was the oar resting at her feet. Lori's thoughts raced as the bear took another step toward her, its claws scraping against the dirt as it reached the water's edge. Within a few yards, the bear stopped and sniffed the air. Its massive form blocked the sunlight as it stood on its hind legs, towering over Lori. Panic surged through her. The boat, bobbing gently in the water, seemed too fragile to offer any real protection. Without thinking, Lori grabbed the oar and swung it toward the bear, hoping to strike fear into it. The bear growled, unfazed by the blow, and took another step forward. At this point, Lori knew she couldn't simply shout and hope the bear would leave. She had to act fast. Desperation took over. Lori scrambled to the back of the boat, her legs trembling as she tried to push the motor into action. The bear, relentlessly pursuing, began clawing at the side of the ship, sending splinters of wood flying into the air. The sound of the boat's motor sputtering to life barely reached Lori's ears over the pounding of her own heart. She shoved the throttle forward with all her strength, the boat lurching as the motor roared to life. The vibrations from the motor rattled her teeth, but they gave her the momentum she needed. She could hear the bear's heavy steps behind her as it plodded into the shallows, its massive paws sending ripples across the water's surface. The bear, still determined, followed as she powered the boat away from the shore. Lori's breath came in short gasps, her hands tight on the oar as she tried to keep her balance. The small and vulnerable boat felt like a flimsy lifeboat in the face of such an imposing threat. The bear continued to pursue her, the water churning around its massive paws as it waded into the shallows. She could hear its growls, closer now, and it spurred her on. She had to get away. The motor's hum grew louder, but the bear's persistence grew stronger. Each time the boat surged forward, the bear seemed to come just slightly closer. After an eternity, the boat surged forward, gaining speed. Now far behind, the bear seemed to lose interest and retreated into the forest. Still breathing heavily, Lori glanced over her shoulder to see the massive shape disappearing into the trees. The adrenaline slowly began to ebb from her body as she realized she had narrowly escaped death. Her hands still gripped the oar tightly, but the tremors were subsiding. She couldn't stop shaking, but she was alive. Her heart still raced, but she forced herself to calm down. Still gripped tightly on the oar, her hands trembled with fear and aftershocks. Lori knew she had been lucky. The outcome could have been much different if she had been a second slower in starting the boat, or had not had the strength to fight back with the oar. The bear had been determined, and Lori could barely outmaneuver it. The proximity of death had been chilling, and for the first time in years, Lori felt the full weight of the wilderness's unpredictability. As the boat drifted away from the shore, Lori took a moment to reflect on the close call. The bear's unexpected attack had shaken her to her core. She had always known that venturing into bear country came with risks, but she had never imagined an encounter like that. She realized she had been unprepared for such a dangerous situation, despite her years of experience fishing alone in remote areas. This was not a time for pride, but a moment for caution. From that day forward, Lori vowed to be more cautious when venturing into bear territory. She began carrying bear spray and taking other precautions to avoid similar encounters. Her brush with death had taught her a valuable lesson about the unpredictable nature of wildlife and the importance of being prepared for anything. She also began fishing with a radio in case she was in another dangerous situation. Lori knew that being in the wilderness alone required skill, experience, and a deep respect for the creatures that shared it with her. Though she continued to fish alone, her adventures in the wild were never quite the same. She could no longer enjoy the solitude with the same carefree attitude she had once had. The wilderness had shown her its dark side, a side she would never forget. On the crisp morning of October 5th, 2024, Cedar Creek, a small town nestled at the edge of the dense forests of Montana, was suddenly thrown into chaos. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden light over the quiet streets when an enormous grizzly bear charged straight into the local police station. The town, known for its peaceful surroundings and occasional wildlife sightings, had never seen anything like this before. The police station, located near the edge of the forest, had its doors smashed open as the bear, enraged and confused, burst inside. Officer Jenna Morales, a seasoned law enforcement officer in her late 30s, was one of the first on the scene. Jenna had a unique background. Before joining the force, she had worked in wildlife conservation. Her understanding of animals, especially large predators like bears, had made her an invaluable asset to the Cedar Creek Police Department. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for this moment. The grizzly was massive, easily weighing over 800 pounds, and its sheer size and strength were terrifying. The animal was not just lost, it was angry. Jenna rushed to the scene, her heart pounding, but she knew she had to remain calm. The bear had already breached the station's defenses, and officers inside were scrambling to contain it without causing harm to themselves or the animal. The bear roared, swiping at desks and overturning furniture, its powerful body thrashing as it tried to find a way out of the building. As the other officers struggled to get a handle on the situation, Jenna quickly took charge. She knew that shooting the bear would only escalate the danger, both for the animal and the people in the station. With her background in wildlife, Jenna understood that the bear wasn't attacking out of malice. It was disoriented, likely pushed out of its habitat by recent environmental changes. Cedar Creek had experienced more wildlife disturbances in recent months, a troubling sign of something much larger going on in the surrounding wilderness. Jenna ordered the officers to clear the room and give the bear space. She grabbed a tranquilizer gun kept in the station for such emergencies, knowing that sedating the bear was their best chance to end the chaos safely. But as she carefully approached the bear, it charged again, slamming into a wall and sending bookshelves crashing down. The officers, keeping their distance, held their breath as Jenna aimed the tranquilizer. The dart hit the bear's shoulder, and though it growled in pain, it staggered slightly. But the adrenaline coursing through its massive frame meant the tranquilizer would take a few minutes to work. Jenna stayed at a safe distance, watching as the bear continued to thrash, knocking over file cabinets and pushing against the windows. The tension in the air was thick, every second stretching out as the bear's movements finally slowed. Within minutes, the massive predator collapsed, its body heavy with exhaustion as the tranquilizer finally took effect. The officers exhaled in relief, but the room was a mess, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. This was no ordinary bear sighting. The attack was part of something much larger, something that Jenna couldn't ignore. In the aftermath of the incident, Jenna's thoughts immediately turned to the disturbing pattern of wildlife behavior that had been escalating in recent months. She had noticed a rise in bear encounters, but this attack was the most aggressive yet. As she stood in the wreckage of the police station, Jenna knew this wasn't an isolated event. The grizzly had been driven from its habitat, and she needed to find out why. As the grizzly lay sedated on the floor of the police station, Officer Jenna Morales quickly shifted her focus from the immediate threat to the bigger picture. The attack wasn't just an accident. It was a sign of something much deeper. She had seen signs of wildlife becoming increasingly aggressive over the past year, and this incident was a wake-up call for the entire town of Cedar Creek. Jenna knew she couldn't investigate this alone. She needed the expertise of someone who understood both the environment and the animals better than anyone else. That afternoon, she reached out to Dr. Liam Turner, a respected wildlife biologist who had spent years studying the behavior of bears in the region. Liam had been following the disturbances around Cedar Creek closely, and when Jenna called him, he immediately agreed to help. Together, they started gathering information from local hunters, farmers, and residents who had also noticed unusual animal behavior. Reports of bears wandering too close to human settlements, other wildlife showing erratic patterns, and even predators fighting for food near town were becoming more common. Liam suggested they start by looking into the root cause of the changes in animal behavior, beginning with the forests surrounding Cedar Creek. He'd already heard rumors of illegal logging and land development projects that had been encroaching on wildlife habitats, disrupting the natural balance. The evidence pointed to a larger problem. Human activity was pushing wildlife to its limits, forcing animals like the grizzly bear into unfamiliar and dangerous areas. Jenna and Liam decided to explore the forests surrounding the town. What they found was alarming. Large sections of trees had been cleared, leaving the forest bare and exposed. Heavy machinery tracks led deep into the woods, evidence of unauthorized logging operations. This was more than just a small disruption. It was the destruction of the grizzly bear's home. The bear that had charged into the police station had likely been pushed out of its territory by the deforestation, confused and desperate for a place to survive. With this information, Jenna and Liam knew they had to act quickly. The situation was no longer just about one bear. It was about an entire ecosystem at risk. They gathered their findings and presented them to the town's council, urging immediate action to halt the illegal logging and work toward protecting the remaining forests. The stakes were high, not just for the wildlife, but for the people of Cedar Creek, whose safety was directly tied to the health of the environment around them. The aftermath of the attack had shaken the town deeply. Many residents were now questioning the balance between development and conservation. For Jenna, the incident forced her to reflect on her dual roles as both a protector of her community and an advocate for the natural world. Working alongside Liam, she began to push for sustainable conservation efforts, advocating for better land management practices and stricter laws. Amelia Brooks set out on one of the most ambitious missions of her career. A renowned wildlife photographer, Amelia had built her reputation on capturing stunning images of elusive animals in their natural habitats. She had traveled the globe, from the rainforests of the Amazon to the tundra of the Arctic, always seeking that one perfect shot. Her work had been featured in prestigious magazines and documentaries, and she was admired for her patience and dedication to showcasing the beauty of wildlife. But it was the untouched wilderness of Montana that had captured her heart. The vast, rugged landscape was home to some of the last truly wild grizzly bears in North America. Amelia had long dreamed of photographing one of these majestic creatures up close, especially a rare shot of a grizzly in a completely natural setting, undisturbed by human presence. Her latest goal was to photograph a mother bear with her cubs, an image that had eluded her for years. Driven by her obsession, Amelia ventured deeper into the wilderness than she had ever gone before. She had ignored multiple safety advisories about staying too long in known bear territory. Park rangers had warned her about the dangers of venturing alone into these areas, especially during the fall when grizzly bears were preparing for hibernation and more aggressive as they sought food. But Amelia's passion for photography had always outweighed her caution. She believed that the only way to capture the essence of these was to immerse herself in their environment. On that crisp September morning, Amelia hiked deep into the dense forest of northern Montana, setting up her camera equipment near a hidden clearing. She spent hours building elaborate hides and positioning traps with remote triggers, all in an effort to get as close as possible without disturbing the bears. The thrill of getting the perfect shot consumed her, and the more she pushed her limits, the closer she came to crossing a dangerous line. Finally, after days of waiting, Amelia's patience paid off. She spotted a large female grizzly bear moving cautiously through the trees, two small cubs trailing close behind. Her heart raced as she aimed her camera, careful not to make any sudden movements. The mother bear was massive, her thick fur rippling as she walked, her cubs playful and curious at her side. Amelia held her breath, clicking the shutter as quietly as possible, capturing the moment she'd been chasing for so long. But as she focused on getting the shot, she didn't notice the shift in the bear's behavior. The mother bear, sensing something was wrong, became agitated. She stopped, sniffing the air, her protective instincts kicking in. In her determination to capture the image, Amelia had ventured too close to the bear's space. The mother bear, seeing Amelia as a threat, let out a deep growl and charged. Amelia had no time to react. The bear was on her in seconds, its massive claws swiping at her as she tried to back away. The force of the attack knocked her to the ground, her camera flying out of her hands. Pain shot through her body as the bear struck again, its powerful jaws snapping dangerously close to her face. Severely injured and in shock, Amelia struggled to move, but the bear loomed over her, angry and protective. Amelia lay on the cold ground, her body aching from the force of the grizzly bear's attack. Blood trickled from deep gashes on her arm and side, and every breath sent a sharp pain through her chest. The bear hovered over her for a moment, its fierce eyes locked on her. But then, as quickly as the attack had begun, the mother bear turned and retreated, her cubs trailing behind her into the forest. Amelia was left alone, her body bruised and broken, surrounded by the vast wilderness that had once felt so full of wonder but now seemed terrifying and unforgiving. She knew she was badly injured, and without immediate help, her chances of survival were slim. Amelia struggled to sit up, her hands trembling as she reached for her backpack. The cold air stung her wounds, but the adrenaline pumping through her veins pushed her to keep moving. She managed to pull out a basic first aid kit, fumbling with the bandages as she tried to stop the bleeding. Her mind raced, replaying the encounter with the bear over and over, and for the first time she questioned her obsession with getting the perfect shot. Was it really worth risking her life? As night began to fall, the temperature dropped, and Amelia knew she had to find shelter. Her body was weak, and every step was a battle against the pain, but she couldn't stop. She moved slowly, searching for a safe place to wait out the night. Finally, she found a small overhang of rocks, offering some protection from the cold. She crawled underneath it, her body shaking from both pain and exhaustion. Alone in the dark, she reflected on the choices that had led her here. Amelia had always pushed the boundaries in her quest to photograph wildlife. But now, as she sat in the freezing wilderness, injured and vulnerable, she began to realize the cost of her relentless pursuit. Her obsession had led her to ignore the ethical boundaries that protected both her and the animals she loved to photograph. She had intruded on the mother bear's space, and in doing so, she had endangered both herself and the bear. In the quiet darkness, she understood that her passion for capturing the wild had blinded her to the risks she was taking. The night was long and cold, but Amelia managed to stay awake, determined to survive. When morning came, she knew she had to find a way to signal for help. Weak and barely able to walk, she used her camera's remaining battery to activate a beacon she had attached to it, hoping that someone would pick up the signal. Hours passed and Amelia's strength faded, but just as she was about to lose consciousness, she heard the distant sound of a helicopter. In the aftermath of her rescue, Amelia's injuries took months to heal. But the deeper wounds were in her mind, where the experience had left a lasting mark. The encounter with the bear forced her to confront her motivations and the ethical boundaries of wildlife photography.